Let's take a look at managing conflict. Conflict is inevitable in groups and organizations, and it presents both a challenge and a true opportunity for every leader. People differ, and they use negotiation to handle their differences. Conflict involves opposing forces pulling in different directions. Many people believe that conflict is disruptive, causes stress, and should be avoided. While conflict can be uncomfortable, it's not unhealthy nor is it necessarily bad. Conflict will always be present in leadership situations, and surprisingly, it often produces positive change. The important question is not how can we avoid conflict or eliminate change, but rather how can we manage conflict and produce positive change. When leaders handle conflict effectively, problem solving increases, interpersonal relationships become stronger, and stress surrounding the conflict decreases. Communication plays a central role in handling conflict. Conflict is an interactive process between two or more parties that requires effective human interaction. By communicating effectively, leaders and followers can successfully resolve conflicts and bring positive results. Conflict has been studied from multiple perspectives, including intrapersonal, interpersonal, and societal. Intrapersonal conflict refers to the discord that occurs within an individual. It's often studied by psychologists who are interested in the dynamics of personality and factors that predispose people to inner conflict. Interpersonal conflict refers to disputes that arise between individuals. This is the type of conflict we focus on in organizations. Societal conflict refers to clashes between societies and nations. Studies in this field focus on the causes of international conflict, war, and peace. Conflict is felt like a struggle between two or more interdependent individuals over perceived incompatible differences in beliefs, values, and goals, or over differences in their desires for esteem, control, and connectedness. Conflict is a struggle. It involves a clash between opposing, interdependent parties. If leaders could function entirely independently of each other and their followers, there'd be no reason for conflict. However, leaders do not work in isolation. Leaders need followers, and followers need leaders. This interdependence sets up an environment in which conflict is more likely. Conflict is also an emotional process. When our beliefs or values on a highly charged issue are challenged, we become upset and feel it's important to defend our position. Conflict involves differences between individuals that are perceived to be incompatible. The opportunities for conflict are endless because each of us is unique with particular sets of interests and ideas. These four elements, struggle, interdependence, feelings, and differences, are the critical ingredients of interpersonal conflict. When conflict exists in leadership situations, it's recognized and expressed through communication. Communication is the means that people use to express their disagreements or differences. Communication also provides the avenue by which conflicts can be successfully resolved or worsened, producing negative results. The conflict dimension of communication involves the objective, observable aspects such as money, weather, and land, and the relationship dimension referring to participants' perceptions of their connection to one another. In human communication, these two dimensions are always bound together. To illustrate the two dimensions, consider the following hypothetical statement made by a supervisor to an employee. Please stop texting at work. The context dimension of this message refers to rules and what the supervisor wants the employee to do. The relationship dimension of this message refers to how the supervisor and employee are affiliated, to the supervisor's authority in relation to the employee and their feelings about one another. It's the relationship dimension that implicitly suggests how the content dimension should be interpreted, since the content alone can be interpreted in different ways. If a positive relationship exists, then the content, please stop texting at work, will probably be interpreted by the employee as a friendly request by a supervisor who is honestly concerned about their job performance. However, if the relationship between the supervisor and employee is superficial or strained, the employee might interpret the content of the message as rigid, directive, and delivered by a supervisor who enjoys giving orders. There are two major kinds of conflict: conflict over content issues and conflict over relationship issues. Both kinds of conflict are prevalent in groups and organizational settings. Heated debates about the advantages or disadvantages of a particular rule is a familiar occurrence in most organizations. These disagreements are considered conflicts on the content level when they center on differences in beliefs and values or goals and ways to reach those goals. Each of us has a unique system of beliefs and values that constitutes a basic philosophy of life. We've had different family situations as well as educational and work experiences. Others' viewpoints are often very different from our own. If we perceive that another person is communicating with incompatible to our own viewpoint, a conflict in beliefs or values is likely to occur. Conflicts can also occur between people because they have different values. When one person's values come into conflict with another's, it can create a difficult and challenging situation. A second common type of content-related conflict occurs in situations where individuals have different goals. Researchers have identified two types of conflict that occur regarding groups: procedural conflict and substantive conflict. Procedural conflict refers to differences between individuals with regard to the approach they wish to take in attempting to reach a goal. Procedural conflicts can be observed in many situations, such as determining how to best conduct job interviews, choose a method for identifying new sales territories, or spending advertising dollars. Substantive conflict occurs when individuals differ with regard to the substance of the goal itself or what the goal should be. Conflict can occur as a result of two or more parties disagreeing on what the goal or the goals of the group or the organization should be. Relational conflict refers to the differences we feel between ourselves and others concerning how we relate to each other. Relational conflict is usually related to incompatible differences between individuals over issues of esteem, control, or affiliation. The need for esteem and recognition has been identified by Maslow as one of the major needs in the hierarchy of human needs. Each of us has the need for esteem. We want to feel significant, useful, and worthwhile. When our needs for esteem are not being fulfilled in our relationships, we experience relational conflict because others do not see us in a way we wish to be seen. At the same time, we want our own esteem needs satisfied. Others want their esteem needs satisfied as well. If the supply of respect we can give each other is limited or scarce, then our needs for esteem will clash. All of us are human and want to be recognized for the contributions we can make to our work and our community. When we believe we're not being recognized, we feel conflicted on the relational level with others. Struggles over issues of control are very common to interpersonal conflict. Each one of us desires to have an impact on others and the situations that surround us. Control allows us to feel competent about ourselves. However, we see others as hindering or limiting our control. Interpersonal conflict also ensues. Conflicts over control are common in leadership situations. When leaders clash with one another over control, or when control issues exist between leaders and followers, interpersonal conflicts do occur. In addition to wanting relational control, each of us has the need to feel included to our relationships, to be liked and receive affiliation. If our needs for closeness are not satisfied in our relationship, we may experience feelings of conflict. Relational conflicts, whether they're over esteem, control, or affiliation, are seldom overt. Due to the subtle nature of these conflicts, they're often not easy to recognize or to address. Even when they're recognized, relational conflicts are often ignored because it's difficult for many individuals to openly communicate that they want more recognition, control, or affirmation. Relational conflicts are complex and not easily resolved. However, when they're expressed and confronted, it can significantly enhance the overall resolution process. Communication is central to managing different kinds of conflict in organizations. Leaders who are able to keep channels of communication open with others will have a greater chance of understanding others' beliefs, values, and needs for esteem, control, and affiliation. With increased understanding, many kinds of conflict will seem less difficult to resolve and more open to negotiation. One of the most recognized approaches of conflict negotiation in the world was developed by Roger Fisher and William Ury. Derived from studies conducted by the Harvard Negotiation Project, Fisher and Ury provide a straightforward, step-by-step method for negotiating conflict. This method, called principled negotiation, emphasizes deciding issues on their merits rather than competitive haggling or through excessive accommodation. Principled negotiation shows how you obtain your fair share decently and without having others take advantage of you. The Fisher and Ury negotiation method comprises 4 principles. Each principle directly focuses on one of the 4 basic elements of negotiation: people, interests, options, and criteria. Effective leaders frequently understand and utilize these 4 principles in conflict situations. To be effective in dealing with conflicts, both the problem factor and the people factor need to be addressed. In particular, Fisher and Ury argue that people factor needs to be separated from the problem factor. Our personalities, beliefs, and values are intricately interwoven with our conflicts. However, principled negotiation says that people and the problem need to be disentangled. By separating people from the problem, we enable ourselves to recognize others' uniqueness. By focusing on the people aspect, we become more aware of the personalities and idiosyncratic needs of those in whom we're in conflict. The second principle, which is perhaps the most well-known, emphasizes that parties in conflict must focus on interests and not just positions. Positions represent our stand or perspective in a particular conflict. Interests represent what's behind our positions. Your position is something you've decided upon. Your interests are what caused you to so decide. Focusing on interest expands conflict negotiation by encouraging individuals to explore the unique underpinnings of the conflict. The third strategy in effective conflict negotiation is to invent options for mutual gain. This is difficult to do because humans naturally see conflict as a win or lose proposition. The method of principled negotiation emphasizes that we need to brainstorm and search hard for creative solutions to conflict. We need to expand our opinions and options and not limit ourselves to thinking that there's a single best solution. Used together, these strategies can provide a well-sustained approach to setting conflicts in a way that are likely to be advantageous for everyone involved. It's important to emphasize the complexity of conflict and the difficulties that arise in addressing it. There's no universal remedy or simple path, except for a few newsstand-type books that claim to provide quick cures to conflict. Only a few sources give practical techniques for resolution. Differentiation describes a process that occurs in the early phase of conflict. It helps participants define the nature of the conflict and clarify their positions with regard to each other. It's very important to conflict resolution because it establishes the nature of the conflict. Differentiation requires that individuals explain and elaborate their own position, frequently focusing on their differences rather than their similarities. Differentiation represents a difficult time in the conflict process because it's more likely to involve an escalation of conflict rather than cooling off. During this time, fears may arise that the conflict will not be successfully resolved. Differentiation is also difficult because it initially personalizes the conflict and brings out feelings and sentiments in people that they themselves are the cause of the conflict. The value of differentiation is that it defines the conflict. Being aware of these programs often focuses the conflict, gives credence to both parties' interests in the issue that's in conflict, and, in essence, depersonalizes the conflict. Fraction refers to a technique of breaking down large conflicts into smaller, more manageable pieces. Fractioning gives focus to the conflict. By narrowing down large conflicts, individuals give clarity and definition to their difficulties instead of trying to solve the whole host of problems at once. Third, downsizing a conflict helps to reduce the emotional intensity of the dispute. Smaller conflicts carry less emotional weight. Fractionation facilitates a better working relationship between participants in the conflict. Interpersonal conflicts can be made less threatening if individuals communicate in a way that preserves the self-image of the other. The threat of conflict is lessened if participants try to support each other's self-image rather than to damage it just to win an argument. It's important to be aware of how people want to be seen by others, how conflict can threaten those desires, and how our communication can minimize those threats. There's no doubt that people have different ways of handling conflict and that these different styles affect the outcomes of conflict. A conflict style is defined as a pattern response or behavior that people use when approaching conflict. One of the most widely recognized models of conflict styles was developed by Kilman and Thomas. The Thomas-Kilman model identifies 5 conflict styles or modes: avoidance, competition, accommodation, compromise, and collaboration. This model describes conflict styles along 2 dimensions: assertiveness and cooperativeness. Assertiveness refers to attempts to satisfy one's own concerns, while cooperativeness represents attempts to satisfy the concerns of others. Each conflict style is characterized by how much assertiveness and how much cooperativeness an individual shows when confronting conflict. Because of past experiences or situational factors, some people may rely more heavily on one conflict style than others. Understanding them can help you select the conflict style that's most appropriate to the demands of the situation. Avoidance is both an unassertive and uncooperative conflict style. Those who favor the avoidance style tend to be passive and ignore conflict situations rather than confront them directly. Avoiders are not assertive about pursuing their own interests, nor are they cooperative in assisting others to pursue theirs. Competition is a conflict style of individuals who are highly assertive but pursuing their own goals and uncooperative in assisting others to reach theirs. A competitive style is essentially a win-lose conflict strategy. Accommodation is an unassertive but cooperative conflict style. An approach that is other-directed, accommodation requires individuals to attend very closely to the needs of others and ignore their own. Compromise occurs halfway between competition and accommodation and involves both a degree of assertiveness and a degree of cooperativeness. Compromisers attend to the concerns of others as well as to their own. Collaboration requires both assertiveness and cooperation. It's when both parties agree to a positive settlement to the conflict and attend fully to the other's concerns while not sacrificing or suppressing their own. The conflict is not resolved until each side reasonably is satisfied and can support the solution. Collaboration recognizes the inevitability of human conflict. It confronts the conflict and uses conflict to produce constructive outcomes.